How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today's World of Tanks console video will look at the mercenary tanks and what mercenary tanks you should be looking at considering they wargaming. I've basically been saying that the mercenary contracts will be coming back to the game. We'll give a little overview as to what the contracts are and also the best tanks that you want to pick up throughout the mercenary tech tree. Usually there's only a few contracts available, so hopefully some of the tanks that come up on this list will be able to be used and picked by you guys when they become available in game. So the first ones, obviously we're just going to pop over to the tech tree, and you can do this yourself. Obviously it's the mercenary tech tree right here, right next to the premium tech tree at the top. Unfortunately you can't filter through them, but I'm going to give my overview as to a couple of them. For today's video, we're not going to look at tiers 3 and 4 because they just are basically those tiers that I don't really want to tell anyone what the best overpowered tier 3s and 4s are, because it's not going to be fun for new players. So if you're there for that, then you can find your information elsewhere, but for this video we will be looking at tiers 5 to 10. So the first one on the tier 5 list is gotta be the long bomb. Now this is a AT2 with a derp gun. Yes, that is right, that's an AT2, which is super heavily armoured to begin with, I guess, except from the cupola on top. It basically has this stupid gun on it, and it means that you can hit enemies for 350 damage, especially if you're okay with firing a little bit of premium rounds in this thing to make sure that you pen. Yeah, if you fire premium you get 104 pen. The shell velocity of the rounds are quite slow, so I am going to say that, but they are actually really fun to use, and I'm pretty sure that you get heat rounds as your second round, and if you manage to pen, that's 350 damage you can consistently pick up. And considering you're at tier 5, most tanks do have less than 104mm of armour, and if you're an experienced player you can really make use of your knowledge of weak spots to be able to pen pretty much every single tank that you'll meet in this game, so long as you put yourself in the right situation. Obviously there's a few situations where you'll just get penned by tier 7s that you might meet in this tank, being through the front of your tank just because they have that penetration, but for the most part this tank is really fun, and it plays quite interesting as a British tank destroyer or heavily armoured one that actually relies on having this big derp gun rather than the usual fast firing AT2. Now there's a few other ones, so I mean the other one is realistically this bulwark, which just has stupidly annoying gun to come up against. Basically it has really high penetration for tier 5, and it also means that the DPM on this thing is pretty ridiculous. You reload in 1.7 seconds to do a whopping 55 damage, but it's like a pea shooter. Honestly, you're bashing out damage super quick, and it's super good for getting the assistance damage. Is the armor particularly great? No, it's not particularly amazing, but it certainly can pull off some bounces, and if you angle in this thing, which you can do, you can actually pull off those bounces every now and again. Can you rely on it? Yeah, pretty much with the armor. If you angle like this, you'll be able to actually pull off a few bounces, and hopefully against tier 5s that haven't necessarily learnt the game that much, then yeah, I think that that's a good one to have a look at. Obviously you've got things like the centrifuge that you could also go with because of the spaced armor that it's got. I'm pretty sure it's just like a Matilda, but with spaced armor even more so. So it's going to be really good, same as the smooth man. So I guess all of the tier 5s are realistically going to be okay if you decide to choose them, but my favourites are the long bomb and the bulwark, just as a kind of little guide there towards which ones are the best. Then I guess we'll go on to tier 6. Now obviously you'll see the ones that I've picked up being the Stinger and the Spyglass as these light tanks. The Spyglass being the best one for sure out of the two, That's because it has the speed of a light tank. Obviously, it's got an autoloader as well. So you've basically got an autoloader with a 4-shot clip that does 135 damage per shell, meaning that you can actually do 540 average damage in your clip at tier 6 as a light tank, which is really, really nice. It's got like this AMX 1375 kind of vibe going on. Really, really good tank, really fantastic, and the speed is really nice as well. Also whacking on the view range if possible with the advanced optics, it can be a real pain to come up against, and at tier 6 you can have some fantastic games and be super influential in this tank. Now, another one out of the two best ones basically at tier 6 being the Stinger and also the long reach. Now, this is just absolutely disgusting. It's a tier 6 with this 390 alpha damage gun that this thing gets, 122mm with 175 pen on its standard rounds and 217 on its premium, meaning that whatever you come up against, you can really put some pressure on them. The reload is quite long, I'm not going to lie. You've got a 16-second reload to do 390 alpha damage, so you're looking at like 1500 DPM when you put all of the perks on that increase the alpha damage. That does mean that the long reach is actually really, really good at tier 6. I mean, 1500 DPM on a heavy at tier 6, there's pretty much no other real heavies at tier 6 that are going to be able to have the impact like you will with every single shell that they fire. Now, this is basically one of those things where Wargaming decided that they'll just take the best bits of all of the various different tanks, add some spaced armor to the armor layout of the standard tanks in the tech tree, and then call it balance, because, you know, I guess that's what they do at Wargaming headquarters. But we won't go into that. This tank is really, really good for those of you who want to pick up this overpowered mercenary tank, which is the long reach. Now, obviously you could go with Stinger, but the Spyglass is my personal favourite along with the Reach, and you could go with the Plaguebringer, but it's just kind of like another M4 Sherman with a T25/2 turret. Yeah, it's not particularly my kind of cup of tea, but for those of you that are interested in that, you could go with that. At tier 7, we don't really have too many options or too many quarrels with regards to which one is the best, and that is the Slapjack. Now, Wargaming being typical Wargaming, thinking that what we'll do is we'll get a T29 turret, which is already stupidly good. We're going to whack on this German gun on this thing that can have stupid accuracy. You'll basically be able to just annihilate the opponents that you come up against. Super high rate of fire for a heavy tank, reload in 6 seconds to do 220 damage, which is really, really good, and certainly not used to doing that in any other tank in the game. Obviously you've got the IS's hull, which means that you can get up to decent speeds, and also it's quite slim and you can kind of wiggle around and sometimes get a bounce, although you know, you're probably not going to bounce too much with the hull, but it's realistically getting hold down and using the positions where you can get hold down to have some superb games, especially in a tank like this, and it certainly does happen. And this is probably the best tier 7 mercenary tank that you can get. I mean, the Jammer might be interesting for those light tank drivers, but you're probably not going to want to play the Ramrod, considering it's like an M4 Stuart at tier 7. Yeah, not the kind of tank you really want to play at tier 7, I'm not going to lie. Then I guess, moving on to tier 8, there is only one, and that's the Cruncher. This is kind of like a very weird tank. It gets this spaced armor kind of thing all around its turret, which makes kind of penning it a little bit of a problem. You can pen it through the side if you've got really high pen and you're not firing heat rounds. But other than that, you can pretty much hit the cupola of this as well, so make sure that you're aiming at that if you can. Obviously the hull of the tank is pretty weak, so you want to be aiming at that. Don't really go for any of the spaced armor on this thing. Basically the tank's pretty good, and it gets up to fairly decent top speed of 52 kilometers an hour with a decent gun. 0.34 accuracy, probably get that down to like 0.28 or 0.27 or something with all of the perks that you can put on this thing. Obviously you want stabilizers on it, and yeah, really good tank. And I guess if you want to pick it up at some point, then go ahead. As for the tier 9s, we've got probably the most broken tank at tier 9 being the hard case. Now this thing's ridiculous. You're better off going side on in this thing. I'm not even joking. Like, you were genuinely better off going side on in the hard case. This is because it gets stupid amounts of spaced armor on the side. Not only do you get 1 plate, you get 2 plates, you get 3 plates, and then you get the armor behind that, which makes it ridiculous. And if you hit the bit which is commonly a bit of a bounce zone on the Russian heavies, you can have armor. I've tested it on tanks.gg or some tank inspector website online, and you can have armor values of 1,000 armor on the side if you're angling and people hit into your side, which is actually disgusting. And I'm not even joking. This thing in the side armor is fantastic. I am going to say, however, there is one frontal or side-on weak point, and that is right at the front near the drive wheel where you see the track, where this kind of pattern is. You'll be able to actually pen through there, so that's kind of where you want to aim, that frontal drive wheel that you can see on the tank, and that is your kind of key to success. Where that front track is, you can pen and deal damage through there, and it has the least amount of spaced armor. So if it's going like side on like this, then you can pen there fairly easily. It's actually weaker frontally, obviously, because it doesn't have any spaced armor on the front, so you'll be able to actually pen it through the lower plate. So if you're playing in this thing, it's better to actually kind of wiggle side to side, making it super hard for the opponents to hit you. And if you get hold down in this thing, you are pretty much impenetrable. The turret is super hard to actually pen. I mean, if someone hits your cupola, I guess is one of the only ways that you can actually deal damage to this tank. If it gets hold down, yeah, not a tank I want to be coming up against in any game on World of Tanks console, that's for sure. And it certainly is one of the most overpowered tier for tier mercenary tanks out there that they ever decided to create. You know, creating a T10 with spaced armor and with a silly kind of turret makes, yeah, it's just didn't make sense to create it, and it's not a tank in real life, and I really don't get why they made it. But then if you want to pick it up and play it, you can do. I mean, the DPM of the tank is kind of suffers. It's like 1900 to 1800, so you're not going to be whacking out high amounts of damage. But when you put on all of the DPM perks, etc., you are going to be able to whack out about 2100 DPM or more, actually, probably looking at in the range of 2300. So play your cards right, save yourself, and with the 330mm of penetration on your premium rounds, means that for the most part you will be able to go through anyone you come up against, whether that be at tier 9 or tier 10. So you know, it's a broken tank. I don't really know what else to say. Yeah, fantastic one, and certainly one I'm going to be going for when the new contracts for mercenary tanks come back out, which hopefully, according to Wargaming, will be fairly soon. Then of course we have the Sharpshooter. This is oh god, Wargaming making a chieftain turret on kind of this weird pattern hole type thing. Yeah, interesting kind of layout, and certainly a tank that you'll probably want to pick up. It's a really good tier 9, that's for sure. Really good, and obviously the lower plate is a weak point, but for the most part you will be able to actually pen quite a lot of people in this thing, and yeah, it's a really good one. If you want to pick it up, it's like a tier 9 chieftain, so I mean, take from that what you will, but yeah, certainly want to pick it up if you can. Then as for the tier 10s, there are two ones that I would go for first, and the first one that you should go for, no matter who you are, is the machine. This thing is, well, I'm sure many of you have been clipped by the machine in-game before, as with the Chisel being another good tank in-game. But the machine, what is actually special about this mercenary tank? Well, it's basically a 50B hull, which is fairly quite strong. I mean, let's not joke about anything. You can get penned in this frontal drive wheel, even when you're kind of aiming straight at someone. If they get any kind of area towards the frontal drive wheel, which is the very first bit of the track, they can actually shoot through there and automatically pen, no matter what the angle is. So if you're coming up against the machine frontally and you've got a bit of distance, make sure to aim where this front bit of track is, to the side of the tank. So aiming at the side of the tank, but the very steep angle, you should be able to actually pen the front of the tank, even when it angles and stuff like that. If it is hold down, you can hit the cupola of the tank, which you can see on top, that's green, that very top left-hand bit of armour there, that you can actually pen that. It's got a chieftain turret, of course, because, you know, why not? Take the best parts of every tank, as I've said before. Chieftain turret on a 50B hull, which is already pretty strong from the front, except from that weak point that I noted. And then not only does it get that, let's whack on the unnerfed Skoda gun that you do get on the TVP. What on earth were they thinking? It's a 3-clip or 4-clip autoloader, even, I should say. 320 damage per shot, which means that you got like 640, 1280 damage in one clip, which means that, you know, you can pump out that damage very, very quickly. 1.5 second intra-clip reload, which means that within 4.5 seconds you've dealt 1280 damage, which is, let's not joke about it, that is crazy. And it does it consistently. The accuracy on the tank, if you put accuracy perks on, can be like 0.28, 0.27, which means you're very rarely going to miss in this thing. It's going to be super accurate. And if you put the ones where you can fire on the move, let's not joke around, yes, you can go 67 kilometers an hour as well. So not only do you have a broken turret, you've got a broken hull as long as people don't use that weak point. Then you have 67 kilometers an hour with the unnerfed TVP gun. Yeah, anyone that says this tank isn't overpowered is just... They obviously, you know, they're trying to boost their own ego by saying, like, yeah, they can take out a machine from full health. That just means that they're a good player. It doesn't mean that necessarily, you know, the tank isn't broken. I could say, you know, some of the most broken tanks in the game aren't that overpowered because I can take them out. But for the majority of players, one-on-one, this tank will definitely win if you're the same skill cap as the other player. And consider it's an autoloader, the skill cap is raised even higher, meaning that you can really punish the opponents that you play against in this thing if you play it correctly and you're used to playing autoloaders. Side armor of this thing is paper, so yeah, that's kind of the one trade-off, I guess, of the machine. So yeah, as far as the machine goes, 100% the first mercenary tank you should ever get, if you can. And you'll have to complete the contract to do that. It does take quite a while, and it's a long grind to be able to get it, but it's 100% worth it. Whether Wargaming nerf this thing when it comes back into the game, I don't know. As part of the contracts coming soon, we'll just have to wait and see, and hopefully it doesn't, and it's not completely broken when it does come back. Then the last tank that we will go over as part of being the best ones is the Chisel. This is a M48 pattern with this like Centurion hull with spaced armor on it, with a fantastic gun. This thing is super good in game, really good. It's like an upgraded pattern. Basically, the spaced armor makes it even more effective, so it means that you can actually bounce a couple of shots, even though your side armor is pretty weak. I'm not gonna lie. You can get penned if people get this side of you, but for the most part, if they are firing heat rounds, they're gonna bounce even more so than with just the standard spaced armor that you get on a tank like this. Stops also HE rounds coming in from the back if someone decides to fire a HE round at you on the odd occasion. Not going to happen all of the time, but yeah, this tank is just really pretty disgusting. I mean, the turret armor is fairly weak. You can pen it fairly reliably if you get any kind of area on the cheek of the tank and not the mantlet. Obviously, you can go for the cupola if you feel the need to, but for the most part, you'll have enough pen to go through the actual turret. So rather than shooting the actual hull of the tank, I would recommend shooting the turret if you can get the side of it, or if you can just get the side of the side armor without heat ammunition. Yeah, really, really good tank though. You've got 400 base alpha damage, 270 pen on your standard rounds, which means that you can actually fire super quick. These are APCR rounds as well, I believe, so you get APCRs for standard, which means that you can hit targets on the move very, very easily. 0.32 accuracy base, which means that you can get it down to probably like 0.24 if you're using all of the accuracy perks that you can do on the tank, meaning that you are never going to miss in this thing, and I mean never. 9.5 second reload is fairly lengthy, but then again you'll be having 2400 DPM plus the DPM perks. You're looking at like 3000 DPM probably on this thing. It is one of the best medium tanks in the game, and certainly one that you should probably get if you haven't got it already when the mercenary contracts come out. Now, we're going to move into what the mercenary contracts are and probably how they'll come into the game in just a second. So what they are basically these, they're kind of a series of challenges. Now, for the tiers 3, 4, 5, they're pretty easy. They go up as in difficulty as you get up through the tiers of the mercenary tanks. So, for example, tier 3 might only require you to get, say, I don't know, 50,000 XP's worth of actual like XP to get the tank, plus a few other kind of actual medals and certain challenges within the game to be able to pick it up and complete stages. There may only be like 4 stages for a tank like the Caboose, or maybe even only 3 stages. Yet when you move up to something like the Machine, you're going to be looking at 9-10 stages, with a total XP, I think, if I remember rightly, being like 1.3 million in total, and the XP is actually split between various different challenges. So, for example, you might have to play the French auto-loading heavy tanks, or it's not necessarily that specific, but it will be like you have to play French heavy tanks for 100,000 XP. That will mean that you will have to grind through the French heavies to be able to get it, and often it's actually limited to a specific tier. So it will say that you have to complete it from tier 10 or tier 8 to 10. So you have to do the damage or the XP from tiers 8 to 10 in the French heavy tank line. Then you might have to do something like the Chieftain. You might have to grind through the heavy tank line on the or the medium line on the British tanks to be able to get the turret. It's that kind of system whereby you take the small parts of it and then you have to complete certain operations based around the nationality of all of the various parts of the tank. So that will be similar for these. So I know for the Machine previously, I think you had to play the TVP line from like tier 7 to 9 or 7 to 10. You could play any tank between there, and then you had to get 100,000 damage. You might have to set 3 people on fire, and you might have to do some extra stuff. So it's just, they'll give you a set of objectives. You complete them. Each stage has 3 objectives. Once you complete each of the objectives, you complete the stage. Once that stage is done, you move on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. You do get rewards for each stage, but they tend to only be like silver, or you'll get an XP booster or something like similar to that, free XP or something. It will give you a little reward, nothing substantial, but they tend to be stuff like that, maybe premium time. And then when you get to the final stage, you'll unlock the actual tank, and that is usually the longest stage. So as you go through the stages, they get progressively harder, and then once you complete them, you will get the tank overall. So for those of you who play a lot of the game, then the Machine is probably going to be fairly easy for you to get, but they limit the time available for the contract usually, so it would usually be 3 months for you to be able to complete the Machine contract and get the tank, and then it would come out of rotation and you'll have to pick up something else as the contract. Now once you actually choose a contract, for example the Machine, you then can't complete any other contract on the tech tree. So if you want another tank, you have to complete the Machine first. So or you reset your actual contract, so it will just reset it back to 0 if you then go back to the machine contract. So if you pick the contract on the machine, you have to kind of complete it to make it worth it. Otherwise, you'll have to then do the machine contract again, which, trust me, is not something you want to be doing. So if you want to get a tier 6 first, do that, then get the machine, because, you know, it's only going to take you a shorter period of time to get that tier 6 mercenary, and then spend the longer amount of time on the machine rather than vice versa, because it could be months before you actually get the tier 10 comparatively to the tier 6. It might only take you a week to be able to complete all of the objectives for that. So do it in the order that you actually, the length of the contract is going to take. Other than that, I think that is literally everything regarding the contracts. We can't go into too much detail with regards to how it's going to come in, but considering Wargaming have constantly been reminding players about the mercenary contracts and the mercenary tanks, and that they're going to be bringing in these contracts back into the game, then I thought it would be a good kind of chance for me to be able to create a guide as to what the best mercenary tanks are, in my opinion. Obviously, leave your own opinions in the comment section down below and let me know what you think. Obviously, you can differ, and your opinion on some of the various different tanks on the mercenary tech tree will change, but that's up to you to leave those in the comments and have a bit of a discussion. I will be checking back regularly to have a little bit of a converse with you to see what you guys think, and then hopefully we can make a new list maybe when the contracts actually get released permanently within World of Tanks console after all of these most recent new updates to the game. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.